Blood on the wedding dress. The old chest sat untouched for decades in the attic of the Willowmere estate. It was a relic of another time, hidden under layers of dust and forgotten memories. When Emily and her fiancé, Thomas, purchased the crumbling mansion with dreams of restoring it, they had no idea what horrors they were about to awaken. The discovery came on a rainy afternoon. Thunder rumbled in the distance as Emily pried open the heavy chest with a crowbar, curiosity getting the better of her. Inside, wrapped in yellowed tissue paper, lay a wedding dress, delicate lace, intricate beading, and a long flowing veil. But it was stained. Dark red splotches marred the once pristine white fabric. At first, Emily thought it was just age, or perhaps wine, until the metallic smell reached her nose. It was blood. Thomas laughed it off when she told him. Probably just a Halloween prank or something, he said. But Emily couldn't shake the unease curling in her stomach. That night, as the storm raged outside, Emily dreamt of a woman in the wedding dress. Her face was obscured by the veil, but her hands were clawing at the gown, trying to rip it from her body. Blood poured from wounds that weren't there. The woman reached out to Emily, whispering words Emily couldn't understand. Emily woke up screaming. Thomas brushed it off again. "This place is messing with your head," he said, holding her close. "Maybe we should get rid of that thing." But when Emily went back to the attic the next morning, the chest was empty. The dress was gone. At first, it was small things. Footsteps in the hallways at night, even though the doors were locked. Whispers in the darkness, just at the edge of hearing, the scent of roses, sweet and cloying, drifting through the house with no source. Then Emily started seeing her, in mirrors, in windows, at the corner of her vision. The woman in the wedding dress, face still hidden by the veil, standing silently, bleeding onto the floor. Emily tried to tell Thomas, but he was growing distant. Distant and cold, as if something unseen was pulling him away from her. One evening, after a particularly violent argument, Thomas stormed out of the house. Emily, left alone, heard the music. A soft, haunting melody played from somewhere deep within the mansion. It sounded like an old wedding waltz, warped and slowed. Drawn to it, Emily wandered through the dark hallways until she reached the grand ballroom, a once beautiful space now decayed with rot and mold. And there she was, the bride. Standing in the center of the ballroom, swaying to the music only she could hear. Blood soaked her dress now, dripping onto the cracked marble floor. Her veil lifted slightly, revealing a twisted, decayed face, lips stitched into a grotesque smile. Emily stumbled back, heart hammering, but the bride pointed a skeletal finger at her. "You took him," she rasped. "You will pay." Emily fled the house that night, checking into a small motel miles away. But the dreams followed her. Every night she dreamt of the bride. In one dream, the bride forced the dress over Emily's head, yanking the fabric so tight that she couldn't breathe. In another, Emily stood before a mirror, her reflection smiling back at her. But it wasn't her own face. Desperate, Emily began researching the house's history. She discovered that Willowmere Estate had once belonged to a wealthy family named Ashbourne. Their daughter, Annabel Ashbourne, was to marry a man named Victor Whitmore nearly a century ago. But on her wedding day, something terrible happened. Victor never showed. Rumors said he had been having an affair with one of Annabel's maids. In her despair, Annabel donned her wedding dress and hung herself from the grand chandelier in the ballroom. But when they found her body, it was covered in blood. Wounds carved into her skin spelled out words, "Forever betrayed." Some said it wasn't suicide at all, that Annabel had been possessed by rage and sorrow so deep it had consumed her soul. The townsfolk whispered that her spirit still lingered, bound to the house, seeking revenge on anyone who dared to love within its walls. Emily knew she had to go back. She couldn't run from this. The only way to end it was to face it. She returned to Willowmere Estate on a foggy evening, the house looming like a dark, twisted skeleton against the sky. The moment she crossed the threshold, the air grew cold, heavy. The wedding dress was waiting for her in the foyer, draped over a mannequin that hadn't been there before. The mannequin's head tilted towards her, as if watching. Emily felt drawn to it, an invisible force pulling her closer. Against her will, her fingers brushed the fabric. The moment she touched it, the room around her shifted. Suddenly, she was no longer in the decaying mansion. The walls were clean, the chandeliers blazing with light. She stood in the middle of a grand wedding reception, tables of food, smiling guests, laughter and music. But none of it was right. The guests' faces were blank, featureless. Their mouths opened and closed in silent mockeries of joy. And at the head of the room stood Annabel, radiant in her blood-stained dress, a crown of withered roses on her head. "Welcome," she whispered. Her voice echoed through the hall. "To your wedding." The guests turned toward Emily, their faces warping into grotesque, bloody masks. They reached for her, grabbing, clawing. Emily ran, dodging grasping hands, but the mansion itself seemed alive, corridors twisting and stretching into endless mazes. Every mirror reflected Annabel's rotting smile. Emily found herself back in the ballroom. The chandelier above her swayed dangerously. The music grew louder, frantic. In the center of the room stood Thomas. But he wasn't Thomas anymore. His eyes were hollow, black pits, and blood poured from his mouth. The wedding dress was wrapped around him like a shroud, and Annabel stood behind him, hands on his shoulders, whispering into his ear. "Say your vows," she hissed. Thomas's mouth moved soundlessly, mouthing words Emily couldn't hear. Then he lifted a rusted knife, stepping toward her. "Join us," Annabel crooned. Emily backed away, but there was nowhere to run. The chandelier above creaked ominously, and suddenly, with a deafening crack, the rope snapped. The heavy fixture plummeted downward, and everything went black. Emily woke in the hospital, bandages covering her arms and head. She had been found unconscious in the ruins of Willowmere Estate, which had caught fire and partially collapsed. They told her she was lucky to be alive. Thomas's body was never found. In the weeks that followed, Emily tried to move on, to rebuild her life. But late at night, when the world was quiet, she would hear it, the faint strains of a wedding waltz drifting through the air, and sometimes in the reflection of a dark window or a polished surface, she would see it, a flash of white lace, a veil, and a face grinning with eternal blood-soaked rage. The end.